I would like
That's all I
to
use.
call the meeting to order. Sorry. Sue is not here today. She's at a family event, and so as vice chair of the board, you have the distinct pleasure of listening to me instead of her tonight. And I'm sure it'll be lovely. Anyway, could I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, Sue, or comment? I know that Sue removed the policy and the finance committees from the board reports because they hadn't met, but I'm not sure there's anyone from the finance committee here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Mark's on the finance committee. So any?
But we didn't meet, so.
Okay.
And we did the bills and stuff last meeting.
All in favor of accepting the agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Is there any public communication tonight?
Yeah, I'd like to mention that Bill Clark is here, and he's one of the people who has expressed an interest in joining this board. I don't know the other gentleman. Is he here?
He is not here.
He is not.
His name is Chris Campbell, and he was actually on the hiring committee for our principal search that just concluded at Ferrisburg, and he was planning to come tonight and had a family medical emergency that took him actually out of state, so he was sorry to not be able to come.
You're welcome.
So if there's no other public communication, I guess we should move to the board education, which is, I assume, a discussion about personalized learning.
Yep, and I am sorry because I'm trying to pull up my superintendent's report and it's not coming up. But a couple things while I attempt to
Multitask.
multitask. Can you help?
Would you like a hard copy?
No, I prefer to just
Okay.
toggle between a couple of tabs I have open on my screen. I wanted to make mention of the revote. Never mind.
Recount.
Recount, sorry. March.
So are we in, I think we're in the personalized learning, the board education.
I know, but I think that.
You want to
should that
combine them
have-
together?
should
No,
that have
you
come?
can go ahead if you want to do them both at the same.
Never mind, I'll do that, I'll do this first. So the reason I'm making mention of my superintendent's report is that is queuing up just what is to come with the professional, with the board education for personalized learning. So we recognize that there is much to communicate to the board and to potentially the community as they have been coming to our meetings, just around this notion of student-centered learning. We often talk about student-centered learning as proficiency-based learning, and that's just one part of the larger scope of the transition. So as we continue to highlight the work underway in our schools and look forward to what is to come, we'll be talking about, whether it's in our principal reports or in anything we communicate, we'll be couching it under these four umbrella broad headings of personalized learning, student-owned learning, competency-based learning, and the flexible pathways, the anytime, anywhere learning. So we're trying to get really clear on our messaging so it's evident which part of student-centered learning we're talking about at any one time, because I think that we lose sight of the broader goal when we only talk about proficiencies and standards and grades and that kind of thing. So I kind of laid that out in the report, and I would encourage you to look at the two community sessions. I sent you two presentations we've had, two community information sessions earlier this month. We have a third scheduled. The first one was pretty much Stephanie and I, and then the second one we had Mike McGrath, who's the principal of Montpelier High School, come and talk a little bit about their experience, and then we had a couple of our teachers talk about flexible pathway opportunities with students. And it looks like there's still a lot more questions about, obviously, all of the work, but we have one more session coming up April 16th. So to catch you up to what we've shared with the community and give you some context for the future communication that is to come, I'd really encourage you to walk through the presentations that I shared. There's videos in the presentations that, they're 5 minutes long maybe, but it would really give you some good background in how we're talking about this work with our faculty, with our families, and so forth. So I guess that's the education component part for tonight.
I'm sorry, where are the videos?
I sent them this afternoon. I sent you the two presentations from the community sessions that we've held so far.
So the ones she sent this afternoon are in slides?
Yeah, they're in slides.
And so
attached
there's,
to an email.
I see him now.
especially the one from Mr. McGrath.
Yeah.
Has a bunch of
Yep.
videos in it. Did you have a question on top of that, or did you just want, okay. Two questions in relation to that. So these two presentations, which I didn't get a chance to look through thoroughly, but just kind of skimmed through, are overlapping but pretty distinct in some ways. And so I'm wondering if the third presentation is going to be yet a different, the third night, the April, 13th?
So we've done an exit card at each of the previous two, and then we look through those, the feedback from the parents that kind of helps us set the stage for the third presentation. And I personally haven't had a chance to look through the exit cards, but I know from the questions from the audience that night, there were a lot of questions about how to access or what was available for flexible pathways for students in our school. So I think that might be a direction we go in talking on the 16th. Plus, I think there's a lot of just sort of concrete questions, like what's the difference between a proficiency and a standard? Like, is there a difference? Those kinds of things. So those are probably some of the questions. It's important to know that the work that's underway right now with the faculty is gearing up for what's currently the class, the 8th grade class. They'll be going into 9th grade. So there's a lot of heavy lifting going on right now from the high school leadership team in terms of creating communications documents that will be shared publicly with families, and in order for them to collaboratively develop these documents, they're in meetings and kind of saying, that's not how I'm thinking about that, right? So there's a lot of dialogue and discussion and decision-making that's happening just in order to even create those documents, and then those will be shared publicly. So it isn't as if we're deliberately withholding information about what to expect for next year. It's that we're creating the documents that will help it be very clear among our faculty so that we can be very clear with our community. So I guess that's not coming at the next session because we're working on those pieces, and those are things that will be implemented in the fall. So there's still
In process.
still time. Yep.
I have another question, if
Sure.
that's okay. I was struck in going through the Montpelier, Mr. McGrath's slides,
Yep.
that Montpelier's got some fairly robust material. I don't know how robust they're, but fairly explicit materials about grading and the translations
Yep.
between systems. And so I wondered, was Montpelier then becoming a model for us, or what's the relationship between that and where we're going?
So there's lots of models, each aimed toward the same outcomes, student-centered learning, personalized learning, students being clear on what's expected of them and clear on where they stand in relation to what's expected of them, and able to clearly articulate through personalized learning where they want to go and how they want to produce that evidence of their learning. There's all kinds of models out there, and they aren't terribly varied from one to the other, but what makes them unique and special and important is that the staff developed them in collaboration with one another. So that like the system was developed from within, that's a pretty important part of this. So that work started in development, in 2014 in most schools, 2014, and they're ahead of us, so we are using them for ideas, and because they've clearly articulated things we're deciding too, so we're borrowing from Montpelier, we're borrowing from Harwood, CVU, or wherever it is that we think makes sense, and where there's not alignment, we'll create. So, yeah, they're models, but we're not supplanting any one of those documents as our own, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to use models, because why repeat other people's?
That's my favorite thing. I say it often. Smart people sat in a room and figured this out at one point. So let's tune the work that's in front of us rather than sit in front of a blank white piece of paper and try to create it ourselves.
Did you want to?
I was just going to add that all districts, or most districts, had the benefit of that huge push of professional development in the 14-15 school year through the Agency of Education and the Great Schools Partnership. So, if you flip through those, they've taken some of those framework documents and amended them to meet their own needs at the district level, but there are definitions for a lot of these terms that we're all sort of following. So there is that level of consistency, although it might have the Montpelier Solon owl on it instead of the Commodore ship at the corner.
Are there any other questions or comments? So I guess we can now go to your board report, or your this.
Well, I mean, it's connected, and I did put that front and center, for a reason. So, again, as we communicate going forward, just look for us to sort of characterize the work that we're doing under one of those 4 headings, with students at the center of their learning being the goal, and deep learning also being the goal. So now, may I talk about the recount?
Please talk about the
So there was a petition put forth by voters in each of the towns because our margin was
Narrow.
such that this was part of the allowed procedures. So on March 14th and 15th, the town clerks and election officials got together and recounted, and the margin, instead of being 7 votes, ended up being 6 votes, but our budget still passed. So the recount did not impact that article passing. So there's that. And that's all I know. I haven't heard anything else from the community about any other steps that may come. So, let's see. I put some information in about our principal, Andy Capes, that you approved at the last meeting. And I'll add that there is, the PTO, the Ferrisburg PTO has organized a meet and greet on March 27th from 6 to 7 at Ferrisburg. There'll be coffee and cookies where you'll have a chance to come and meet Andy. So if you're available and can come on over, I think that would be awesome.
Sorry, that was March 27th?
March 27th, which is a Wednesday, from 6 to 7. And then I'm asking for your approval. We are moving forward Kyle Vickers as a PE and health dual certified teacher. He's coming to us from Troy, which is a K-8 school. He has that coveted dual certification that we were after, and he seems like a great fit for our school. So he's been a coach, a referee, and athletics director, as well as a PE and health teacher.
What has he coached? Just out of curiosity.
Don't know.
Um,
Basketball.
I don't-
I think it was basketball.
He also does like Nordic skiing and stuff like that. He'll have our kids outdoors all the time. It's that's one of the hallmark, snowshoeing and skiing and all that stuff. So cross country track, I think also. I don't know, but he's going to be great.
And then also this afternoon, I sent you, oh, sorry.
Sorry, this is a bit of a throwback to the personalized learning thing. So I spoke to a professor of education today, and she said that the two most important things for students learning are stimulating as many of your senses as possible and like having an emotional connection to the information. And I guess I'm not expecting you to like have an answer right now. It's kind of a pretty like deep open question, but are there sort of like efforts being made with like this thinking to the shift of like personalized student focused learning to sort of support that neurology and help really engage our students on that level?
I really love that you asked that question. That is really at the heart of this shift, is that instruction in this model looks completely different. And in fact, I would hope that we would spend the majority of our time talking about exactly what you've just articulated, because those are really the important pieces that in order to truly understand something, you do have to have an emotional connection with the content, and you have to have time to really explore and go deep on those topics, which is part of the model as well. So I've seen that in a number of ways in classrooms, whether through using Socratic dialogue or the Harkness methodology as a means to really get students to talk about what they think and how they feel about something they've read or learned about, where, once this is implemented as part of regular practice, that students can really participate in that dialogue without a lot of teacher-driven questions to stimulate that conversation and keep it going, so students really learn how to make that dialogue happen. We've been in conversation with someone that's very highly skilled in that teaches a lot of courses in that, and she may be able to come over and offer a course for our teachers in that this summer. I see that also present in when we think about the mathematical practices and science inquiry. That's really, and phenomenon-based science instruction. Like, all of those shifts are all about getting students really engaged and motivated and inspired in their learning. Plus, I think the whole idea that you would develop and articulate through a personal learning plan the kinds of learning experiences that you are most motivated to show evidence of your learning through, those are really key elements of this. So, yeah, definitely.
Is there going to be any sort of shift on how the personalized learning plan is used or developed?
Yes, I think so. I think you really hit on something last time when you spoke about that, just that I think one misstep that Vermont made a number of years ago when they rolled out the PLP process to schools as kind of a component part of Act 77 is there was so much focus on the elements of a PLP. So what goes into a PLP? So a lot of schools really came at it from a compliance standpoint, if you know what I mean. So it was like, we have to do this, so we have to find like a format or a template or, something. And then it kind of came in such a way that it was more about filling out the boxes in the template rather than using it as a tool, who cares what it looks like, right, to drive student learning. So the purpose and the focus and the rationale behind why we would even do this was somehow lost in the process of just doing it. So now we have it, so we can think about how to improve that process to actually do what it was supposed to do in the first place, which is drive learning. And again, I mean, the quote that I had pulled up that I didn't share, but I will now because you brought it up. The purpose of any of this is to provide feedback to students that allows them to understand themselves and to be empowered as learners. That's the point of any of it, right? So a PLP is a hub for driving that learning if done well. Now, that doesn't mean that every student in the school is going to love this idea of developing a PLP, but the potential is there for it to be a difference maker, so.
Could it be like any sort of freedom on how that PLP is presented? Like, I know personally, like, the structure that is there has kind of just been like,
Yeah,
make a presentation at the end of the year and,
yeah.
you know, that.
That's a little bit too, like, that's a little
Nitty-gritty.
bit so much not my lane, so I
Yeah.
can't speak to that, but,
So there's nothing inherent in the PLP that says it has to be presented every year.
Mm-hmm.
We thought it would be a good idea and a good experience for teachers to, students to reflect on their learning every year. And not in any kind of high stakes, but increase sort of rigor up to a senior type presentation. And we have that expectation now. The increased rigor piece hasn't really followed because a lot of it is because of the flaws in the PLP system and implementing it and making it something really relevant and integrated and driving. So we're working on that. But the idea of that whole presentation is not necessarily linked to the PLP at all. It is more like that was a framework for students to use to show. So PLP and PLP presentation are two different things.
Okay.
So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Sorry, I'm asking so many questions.
No, it's a great question.
So just to summarize, it sounds like you're trying to make the personal learning plan more personalizable? That's, okay.
and purposeful and a pretty critical component part of bringing about student-centered learning in the process. So, I think that a lot of these pieces have been worked on, not because it's new, kind of worked on separately, and we need to really think about the way that the edges touch between all of this work, because it goes back to that idea that it's really about student learning. That's it. It's about student learning, and making sure that our results as a school system are equitable, and that all students are benefiting from the education, from the educational opportunities that they can access here. So I loved your questions. I thought they were great.
All right, I'm finished.
That's all right.
I have questions related to just the work centered around PBGR
Yeah.
over the last
Yeah.
10 years. Like,
Yeah.
how is that integrated into these new
Yes.
places?
So, again, oftentimes we talk about this work as its proficiency, like as if that's the only part.
Right.
Really what that piece is about, the competency-based education part of that, is really about, in order for students to own their learning, what the goals of that learning are have to be very clear to them, right? They have to understand, this is the thing I'm trying to get, and then there's scaffolding and supports and feedback that helps them get there. And that's proficiency-based learning. That's what it is in a nutshell. So whatever our feedback system is, whatever our evaluation system by grading and reporting system is, it needs to communicate the student in relation to those goals and outcomes.
Yeah.
That's it. So when we talk about PBGRs, like proficiency-based graduation requirements, it's saying, and in order to earn a diploma, you need to be proficient on these things over time, through a variety of learning experiences. So not unlike where students have come from the past, we don't want them just taking English classes, right? We want them to have a broad exposure to many different kinds of things. So they still need to take a variety of courses or equivalent learning through flexible pathways in order to demonstrate that proficiency across those
So those
settings.
PBGR requirements are still intact?
They are still intact.
And these are the ways to get there, got it.
Yes.
All right, I've got another question.
That's okay.
Is there, this might be a little too broad or too like down the details. Is there going to be any sort of way to connect the learning from class to class? Because I know in my personal experience at the high school, like I would kind of get like mental whiplash. Like I'd go to an English class and then like have my head in there, and then like go to statistics, and it's like, whoa, and you know, it totally like messing with my ability to like delve into a topic and really like figure out. Is there going to be any sort of like move?
So I love that you asked that as a yes or no question, but it's not a yes or no question. So all I can say is, in my experience, as I've watched teachers really truly understand this work, the walls between content areas really begin to break down, and there's a lot more overlap between the skills that we're trying to get students to develop. Skills like using evidence to support a claim. It doesn't matter if you're in science or in social studies, that's the same skill. I see lots, as folks get deeper into this work, I see a lot more collaboration. And I've even seen it to the point where courses are developed collaboratively. So students are in a STEM course instead of science then math, or they're in some sort of humanities class instead of English then social studies. So I think the potential is there for that to happen. And that's how this is an evolutionary process and not something that's completely set in stone. So that here it is, here's our program of studies, one and done. Now we're going to live with this for 20 years until we change it, right? So if we do this work right, we're sort of reflecting on our growth as a learning organization and making modifications as we see the benefits for students.
Great, thank you.
Can I chime in
welcome.
one more thing too?
Of course.
So, you know, Alder, maybe you don't know that we created what we're calling a ninth grade core to really focus on ninth grade students and create a different kind of learning environment for them. And there's a lot of planning going on about interdisciplinary work in that area. Now, it's still going to look like discrete content, but because they have all those students at all the same times, there's a lot more room for that kind of collaboration between the teachers and to plan that intentionally, because that's part of it. You have to have the time to plan what that looks like, because you're combining, you're combining strengths and content knowledge into one kind of cohesive unit for students. So I know exactly what you mean about that. Whoa, I'm going to turn my science brain off and go into English now, and it shouldn't be that way. So.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to make one other comment on you, not about this one issue, back to your report, though that all this is part of your report. Just to highlight how great it is that the work of Lynn and Z to get the gold status on the worksite wellness
Yes.
awards from the, that's a very cool thing, so.
Can I back up to
yeah.
hiring for a brief moment?
Please.
Because we're just bouncing all over
Yeah,
the
yeah.
place. I had put TBA for the Director of Learning,
Yes.
and then that process was finalized. So I sent out some materials this afternoon, and I'm bringing forward Violet Nichols for hire as our new Director of Learning and Technology. I sent a resume to you with some other materials. Violet is coming to us from the Mount Abe School District, where she has worked as a math coach in that district for some time. She also worked in a STEM academy out in California. So she has a lot of experience with coding and other sort of more tech components. So she has that whole coding and tech side of it, but then she also has kind of a steeped background in building systems of support for students in terms of response to intervention and MTSS and those kinds of models. And she spent a bit of time in a turnaround school and What that is back with the No Child Left Behind legislation, failing schools were taken over by experts in the field that worked with students with, I think she said the school she worked at had 100% free and reduced population, and they're able to take what's happening in terms of student performance in that school and turn it around and actually produce really good results. So that equity component, she's lived it and led through it in her work. So she actually is a graduate of UHS. And she went off into the big world, and then she's come back and lives actually in Shelburne, and is very excited about the opportunity to come back here to her school. So that's another one I'm looking for.
Is there anything about the hiring process that?
Oh, I could
there
say,
any-
we had 2 separate rounds. So we had a 6-person committee for the first round of that. Actually, Tom sat in at our first meeting where we decided sort of the process and what we were looking for, and articulated sort of the skills and attributes, which led us to be able to develop the kinds of questions we would want to ask. And we brought 6 folks in for an interview from that process, and then narrowed to 2 from there. And then the principals interviewed the 2 finalists and selected one.
Thank you. I guess we're up to the business manager's report.
Okay, so I have a couple points to make that are actually in my current business manager report. Just I'm hoping that people paid attention, especially to the part that I put in there about communication coming from our business officials group. Just because I wanted to make the board aware of the situation that we could be up against as we move into next fiscal year with regards to our chart of accounts and potential software conversion. So I wanted everyone to kind of be aware of where we were at. And I think there was a time when I spoke about this earlier in a board meeting, and I think it was Lori possibly that asked if we could potentially, come up with a letter. And what I ended up deciding was that it seemed like if I was to have a board member write such a letter, it would be me kind of prompting and telling them what to write. So I said, well, I might as well just write my own. So based on the other information from my business officials meetings, I did a letter that was requested of me just to our representative, so that we've got people advocating on that angle. But also there was letters between the whole business officials group that went to the Agency of Education, and also going to the House Ed legislature. We have not gotten any word yet officially on either of those topics, but I just wanted to make everyone on the board aware that it could potentially be a difficult year for our business office staff if nothing changes in the legislature and the deadlines that they've set forth.
Do you know why they're pushing?
Well, the chart of accounts thing has been a push for a while, but they decide, but it was mandated as of a certain date. And I know that the state of Vermont was working on the chart of accounts for a very long time. Maybe they lost staff or whatever, and it got stalled out, so it just didn't happen as quickly as maybe the legislature would have liked to see it happen, and so they finally assigned a deadline to it. I mean, I think that's where that came from. But I don't know if anybody read like the Vermont Digger, lately about how many staff members are missing from the Agency of Education. I think they said 27 positions open. So if you just think about that, they are understaffed, and they are, and yet they have all these goals and things that they need to try to accomplish. So if they can't produce, the business rules to go with our chart of accounts that we're all supposed to comply with, your end result is not going to end up being a uniform chart of accounts, because we're all out there making our own decisions about what code to use. So that's kind of the difficulty with the chart of accounts part. But I think the legislature had a reason for trying to push it and make a deadline, because it's been kind of out there for a while. The software conversion it's a great goal to have everyone reporting uniformly there again. Using the same software could mean that the state of Vermont can upload files from us without us having to actually compile these huge statistical financial reports that we have to do
every year, year after year, and report all this data to them in our own unique way. If we all have the same software, they can literally jump in, grab it and go. And they've got all the statistical information they need or want and all the financial information. So the goal of it is great. They went through an RFP process, they picked a software. The software company that they picked and the program has not been vetted in school systems in Vermont is primarily the issue from what we can see. And so they're implementing in school systems and finding troubles along the way in how that software operates versus how we operate as school district finance in Vermont. And so there's where all the hurdles are. So we think that pushing back the deadline is the best case scenario so that they can catch up with the way Vermont is running their financial systems in schools.
This is what you reported to us
Yeah.
in the
Yep.
fall sometime
Yep.
when Burlington was pulling out of
Yes.
being a test or
Yes.
an early adopter or something.
Right, right. And Burlington is still not implemented in this, in the new
Is
system.
anybody?
There are, well, as I noted in here, there are no Vermont schools that are 100% implemented. There are Vermont school systems that have certain modules implemented, like say they're processing their payroll. But I don't know if anyone is financial in any way or does any kind of accounting. But if you have one module functioning and the rest of them are not, what are you doing to make them connect to each other? You know, what are you doing? Are you posting journal entries to get them all to connect or what, you know? So that sounds very scary to me as a person who would insist on everything working as of a certain date. And I've been through two, if you read through the letters, you know, I've been through 2 software conversions myself in Vermont school districts. And neither of them comprised of having partial modules convert at a time or whatever. It was an entire system going live as of one date and time when everything was ready to go. And usually concurrent with your old system so that you could double check at least the first few processes and make sure everything worked the way it's supposed to.
What happens if we if we, and by we I mean you, just refuse to implement because there's no way you can do it and it's stupid to run a car into a wall?
Well, that's what we're trying to say.
Sure,
But
right.
we actually asked that question. It was kind of funny. It wasn't in a full business officials meeting, but there was about 7 or 8 of us that are on the executive committee because I'm actually the treasurer of the group. Yeah. And it was kind of funny because when we asked the question, it was just basically that, well, there was no real answer as far as what would happen to you because no one has asked that question or discussed that. But you really can't just not comply with a mandate. You know, it's a legislative mandate. We're obligated. So,
Follow
but it is
statute.
funny that the question was
We have
asked
to
in
follow
another
the law.
format than that.
But you see,
Yeah.
Tom, that's the way the legislature does things. They drive a car into a wall and find out it doesn't work.
Sure.
And from what I'm hearing, it's
Okay.
not that it's not working. The system works for the pieces that have been implemented.
It's
It
just not unified and
It's not unified, it's
and
not
there's always-
100%
Yeah,
ready.
everything
It's-
always takes longer to implement
it's
than,
right,
than.
right.
And the last software rollout that the agency implemented this past year, fall, did not go well, and we're still,
Right, and that was your
Still
census counts, your
recovering.
data and
well,
census
yeah,
counts and all
right,
that.
all of the SDLS, so.
Yep.
Longitudinal data system,
Right.
SDLS.
So I don't know that there's anything that we have to, but thank
Nope,
you
I'm
for
just
for
letting
the
you know. It
update
was
on
absolutely
what's-
not
what's
intended to
going on.
have anybody, you know, have to either make comment or, you know, do anything. It's more just notifying you guys, just so that when we come up to July 1st and I say, oh, we've got to code convert, or, oh, we've got to start our process for converting software, you all know what's happening before we get there.
Sue had mentioned 2 things. One, something about policy F42, the capitalization.
Yes,
Is
I've got
there
that. Got
a
that too.
report that you want to give to
Yep.
us?
I've got that too. Okay, so that question was asked after I had already written my business manager report, otherwise I would have incorporated that in here. So apparently the F42 capitalization of assets is on your work plan, and I was looking at it questioning why it was on the work plan, but I think I know the reason. I think it's because maybe in the past we were maybe not in compliance or we were worried about the compliance of this particular policy. But from what I can see, when I read through this again this year, we've solved this as far as our work plan is concerned. So we have a actual schedule of assets that I created when I first got here. We did a huge gathering of information and inventory, gathered values on everything from buildings, land, to everything down to the smaller items that are in your buildings that are capitalized. We have given all that to your auditing firm. And they have approved of the method we're using. We give them depreciation calculations every year. We tell them what's been disposed of or added to the fixed assets. The only thing I would say that I'm not completely 100%, on par with is that we are doing it in spreadsheets. The tracking of it is being done in spreadsheets. We're using the accounting software to extrapolate what we've purchased and add things, and then we're putting it in spreadsheets. I would rather see it more computerized. There are components of software that would allow you to track fixed assets a little better than that. So, but that's not bringing us out of compliance with this policy. It's just a method on how we're actually tracking it that I would like to pursue getting into a better system.
So I guess one of the questions is why this was on the work plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know why it was on there. I think it was an issue before I started here, and in that first year of your first audit, even though I wasn't here during the audit year, when I was doing the audit for that year, that's when we solved this.
And so maybe the policy committee should.
I can send
If
them
you
a message.
talk
and,
to- yeah, that
talk
would
to
be great.
John.
That would be
Yep.
great.
Yep, I'll do that.
Um,
And then I think there was one other thing. Oh,
The RFP.
on
the
my
audit.
report, I also talked about the RFP for audit services.
Yeah.
So we do not actually legally have to go out to bid for audit services, so I just want to make that really clear. It was actually a request of people in the finance committee that, and we made the recommendation also that it's best practice to go out to bid every so often for those kind of services. So it's not required by bid law or anything like that. So we're choosing to do this just because we think it's a good best practice to do that. And also no dissatisfaction with the current auditing firm that we have. We actually have the bid opening this Friday, March 22nd at 2 p.m. We believe we should have at least a couple members, 1 or 2 from the board. If anyone is available, I'm looking for volunteers to be able to come to that and just open the bids, read through them with us in our office. Hopefully it wouldn't take super long. I don't know how many bids we're actually going to have at this point because they can submit them up until 2 p.m. on Friday. So if there's nobody here that is available that time, I can reach out to the other board members also and ask if someone might be available, but if anybody's willing. It's on Friday the 22nd at 2 p.m. at our office. Awesome. Great. What's that? You won't be here. Sue said she could if it was at 10 a.m. in the morning, but I know she's not available because we can't change the time. We have to accept the bids all the way through 2 p.m.
Do you want me to reach out to Lori? Do you want to reach out to Lori?
I can do that.
Or John, Lori or John? to
Lori
see
or John,
If either
okay.
one of them.
So we already have Keith, so we've got one. That's good. And I can reach out to
Okay.
both of them and see if we can get another one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. And I think that's it, unless people have questions on my other information.
Are there any questions? Great, moving along. Thank you. Principal reports. Any thoughts, questions, concerns for principals?
Everything's well structured. Rally into where I can skim through and I get it. This is great.
I had a couple questions. One, Kathleen, sorry, go ahead.
Make an additional, I don't think it made the report because we write these at least a week in advance of when you're actually having the public meeting. But I would like to shamelessly promote Addison Central School is having a night at the ballpark for lake monsters. So we're having ACS night. It'll be July 13th. You can buy tickets for just $7 a piece from any student or myself, or you can call Susie at the main office. But we had Champ at our school last week to kick off this event.
Oh, nice.
And idea is to spend some time together doing something as a family and a community this summer. And we actually make $2.50 off each ticket we sell. So it's a good fundraiser and a way to continue to have connection over the summer for some of our kids. And so if you'd like to participate or join us, it's certainly open to anyone, whether you're in our district or not. Transportation is on your own, but the tickets are being sold for the next 2.5 weeks. So I have the envelope with me this evening if anyone has an immediate need. And we'd be happy to hook you up with tickets. Checks go to the Lake Monsters or cash. The money, it's being run through the PTA. That's a fundraiser through them to help organize. And then your tickets are just at will call. So you pay now, and then we send you a reminder email a couple days before the event, July 13th, and it has fireworks that night. So for $7, you get a baseball game with your family and friends and fireworks. So we're hoping folks can join us. July 13th. Thanks so much.
Do we have to bring our kids?
No. Completely up to you. However you choose to define your family that night. If it's date night, good for you. It is a 6 p.m. game, but it's a game and fireworks. Thanks.
Sounds like fun.
I wondered, you mentioned the resiliency workshop.
Yes.
I'm wondering how many folks you hope to have there. Or
As
expect
many
to
as
have.
we can house. CSAC, this is a collaboration, a partnership with CSAC, and I believe they've already done some in our community, but we haven't hosted one at ACS. Excuse me, we've just concluded a couple other things, one on internet safety, one on the 5 love languages. So we're working to try to provide an event each month for families. So this month it's on resiliency, and it's in partnership with CSAC. So you all are welcome. It doesn't have to be specific to ACS at all, or even again in our district. It's just good information for families to have. Thanks.
Do we get to find out what the book is, since, you know, we're going to be at a... Oh, come on. Well, I mean, you know, there's a concert tomorrow night, so I'm going to miss the kickoff assembly, so...
I'm going both.
Friday morning.
Or 225 at ACS, you can find out what the book is. 225 is our celebration of learning tomorrow.
Word's gonna spread.
Yeah. Going to check out all your Twitter accounts tomorrow. But
It's really great to hear about what's going on in all the schools. I just want to say that. It's just fun to see what everybody's doing.
I also wanted to just recognize the work that the high school administration's done to increase communication and outreach to students. I really like the idea of an open mic. I don't know how well it worked. I don't know, you know, people may or may not appreciate it, but I think it's there has been a rapid acceleration in the last 2 months of information that's come out, and I think it's been great. So I just wanted to. It's been clear, and it's been visible, and it's greatly appreciated.
And we're happy to accept continued feedback. And improve, and, you know, I mean, there's been a lot of information out there about what works in the e-news and what doesn't, and
Yeah.
you know, so certainly send that feedback our way. We can make adjustments. We're not tied to do it any one certain way. So
The goal is communication.
there you go.
The goal is student learning, student-centered learning. Any other questions or comments for the principals? Okay. Student reports. Alder.
So on Friday, March 1st, there was a student-led walkout for Student Voice that a lot of students participated in, and had strong opinions about. And then immediately following that, there was a lot of effort from the administration to sort of like get more student voice involved. So I'd just like to commend them for doing that. And I am specifically trying to get a group together so there's more of a concrete foundation for student voice, because I, think about like if I was in an administrative position, like the lack of there being like a centralized group that I have to go to like ask like, hey, can we get some feedback on this? Seems like a real challenge, and I'm trying to make a system that will help students and administration and teachers all be more informed about what is happening at the school, and what are the ideas that are sort of floating through it, and whatever feedback that students have, that administration has an easier way of sort of getting that feedback, which I think is very important for everyone involved. Then the middle school concert was last Thursday, which I heard was very nice, and the high school concert is tomorrow night. That's all on that. Spring sports started today, much to my leg's chagrin. Long day. And then the Walden trip to New York City is on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, and we are very fortunate to be able to see Hadestown on Broadway in previews, which is a show that actually premiered at the Opera House that was written by a local playwright. So that's very exciting. Yeah, that's all I have.
Any questions for Alder? Okay. Board reports. Christina, anything about Hannaford?
Well, I did miss the meeting last week because I was out of town, but I have a couple things that I'll share from the superintendent's report that was sent to me from there. They just got a $10,000 grant for the makery space, so the makery space is kind of going gangbusters down there. They really have a lot of the public participating in that space, which is great. And then they held their open house on February 14th. I think I had reported that. They had a record of 400 people attend the open house, which was pretty awesome. I did go to that, and the food was pretty amazing. People were walking around with hors d'oeuvres the whole night, so that was worth it in itself. And one other thing, they have this partnership with Middlebury College, and they're getting ready to launch another STEAM after school program for girls coming up for Tuesdays for the next few weeks. So that's it.
Okay. Lori's not here tonight for the VSBA, so community engagement.
Yes, here we are again.
Yes.
So, let's see, the Community Engagement Committee is scheduled to meet this Thursday. And I don't think we're gonna have a quorum, so I think we're gonna have to reschedule that meeting. And I think everyone got the minutes from the last meeting, which I was not able to attend. So moving forward, I think we're going to reestablish the committee. I think there were some board members that said they were interested, and then I know on the agenda, with talking with Sue and Sheila, is trying to move forward with those tabletop present conversations that we want to hold, prior to the start of our board meetings. I think the goal was to get one launched for April 8th. I'm not sure if that will happen at this point, but certainly for the latter part of April, we should be able to tackle.
So there's only one board meeting in April, just to keep that in mind.
Sorry, I
April
forgot
8th is
that,
the only-
yeah. So, anyway.
Can I ask real quick, since our discussion is in part about the tabletop activity, and what the Community Engagement Committee is hoping to get out of the tabletop activities, what they look like?
So the tabletop topics came directly from Sue and Sheila through a conversation. One was to revisit the vision statement, which I know it's on the agenda at the end here. Because the policies, we have a policy that says we should review the vision statement once a year.
Right.
So that was one tabletop topic, was to put it out to see if we would receive any feedback from the public on the vision statement. Does it need to change? Is everybody happy with it? That kind of thing.
I was wondering what the framework but maybe we should just wait until later in the meeting should we do that? I'm looking
We're gonna
around.
have a whole discussion about it.
Okay, all right. So in terms, so I'll move on then.
Okay, I'm done.
So in terms of the Facilities Committee, we haven't met in a while, but we are going to meet at the beginning of the month, and I met with Mike Winslow, who came and talked to us in December, I think, about a stormwater, rehabilitation of the stormwater system, and they're trying to get get us to he, as the representative of the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, is encouraging us to apply for a grant that would allow us to get a full design for a rehabilitated stormwater system. He's going to come to the next facilities committee meeting and talk to the facilities committee meeting about it, because there will be some, if we go ahead with that, there would be a 20% match on the design that we would have to do. And so we have to decide whether or not that's worth doing. Just to kind of throw it up farther, if we make any changes to the amount of impervious surface, i.e. parking lot, or rooftop that is on the footprint of the high school, that may change the amount of, change the rules for us in terms of refurbishing that stormwater pond. So I bring that up to say there are clear paths forward for us for this project, but if we make any changes, those paths disappear. And we may be making changes in the future depending on where our strategic planning goes, where our decisions for the schools goes, where the central office goes, if the central office gets brought into the high school. All of which are questions that we have to be thinking about in the future. Which gets me to the strategic planning committee. I skipped negotiations. So that's my facilities committee report. Negotiations, anything to report?
We've got a meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4:30 here with the support staff, and at 4 o'clock on the 26th with ANTA.
It's a full report.
But there is at this point, we don't have a signed agreement yet.
Yeah. Was Pietro able to come to the last meeting, or?
We had to cancel the last
He was
meeting because
sick.
he had the flu.
Okay. All right, so then the other board report is about the strategic planning committee. Hopefully you saw the minutes. I just wanted to highlight two things. One, a lot of what we spent time talking about was the financial realities that we face. And Elizabeth prepared a kind of a budget exercise for us that suggested that if we just do a level planning and don't do much to change our budgetary priorities, we'll be about $1.9 million over the threshold. So that would be taxed pretty heavily, and we'd end up with a 32-cent increase, which is, since the 8-cent increase passed by the skin of its chinny chin chin, I don't think a 32-cent increase would go very far.
Even 8 cents won't pass next year.
No, and nor should it, and I think that's, so, the board's work is cut out for it over the next 6 to 8 months, and so part of the what I think we came up with is, at the first meeting was a couple of goal areas that we will be focusing on. Student success and achievement, asset management. There was a lot of discussion about the role of community engagement, which everybody agrees is an essential part of this process. At the next meeting, we hope to be developing SMART goals, and SMART stands for specific, achievable, measurable, relevant, and timely. So that that subcommittee can bring that to the board in the early summer, so that we can be making decisions moving forward, and the administration can be making decisions moving forward about the budget to hopefully have a more sustainable economic path. Any questions about this? We are behind. See, I'm just trying to show you how great Sue is for keeping us on time all the time. Action items. So, can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 11th, 2019?
So moved.
Any discussion? Sue had a couple of changes. Gloria, I think she may have sent these to you. One of them was for, in the issue of the date, time, and location, each month should be changed to for 7 months and once a month for 4 months plus 1 retreat. You got that. Another change, I'm saying these changes for all of our benefit here, but another change was that where we indicated the place of meetings, it should be on the second meeting in October, March, and May, rather than the second Monday. The CEC was tabled until future meetings, not next meeting, because that's today and we didn't deal with the CEC yet. And there was an accepted code of ethics where we changed the president to chair. It was on number 17 rather than on number 7. So, small things, but. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes? Say aye. As amended. As amended, sorry.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Well, if you read them, then you saw the minutes. You can
Aye,
make-
then.
Okay, thanks.
I read them.
We need to get a delegate for the voting representative for the VSBA statewide health insurance ratification. So could I entertain a motion to, well, what do we do? Lori, I believe, said she would go ahead and do that. To do what?
To be the delegate.
Is
Okay.
that at the same thing, or that she's already part of, or is she taking it as?
that?
I think it's a separate,
I
it's a
think.
separate
It's unique
thing.
to this project, I think.
Okay. But she understands that she's, it's
I
not
think
just,
It could be that it occurs at the same
okay. I
meeting, but it's a separate process.
just wanna make sure she realizes she's signing up for
I
a
think so.
separate thing, not just a subset of what she already does.
I believe that she understands that.
I think she did last year as well.
She did last year.
Okay.
So can I have a second? Keith. All in favor of accepting Lori as our delegate voting representative for the VSBA statewide health insurance ratification? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I would like to entertain a motion to accept the resignation of Finn Yarborough from the ANWSD school board.
So moved.
So,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I just want to say that Finn was a really good board member and really appreciated his time when he was here.
The fourth is, sorry, do we want to do these hiring recommendations separately or as a group?
I think that you did them separately before,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Lori's
I
were
would like
separately.
a motion to approve the hiring of
Kyle Vickers.
as the high school PE and health teacher.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I would like to entertain a motion to approve the hiring recommendation of
Violet Nichols.
as the Director of Learning and Technology.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions about, we've already heard about her. So, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so, we're only 20 minutes behind, George, come on.
Well, you've been making some real progress here in the last few minutes. You had to do something to redeem yourself.
Thanks, man. So I guess we're on to the tabletop activity. So I guess part of what is going on here, so I'm gonna set this up as I understand it, and then I'm gonna direct to Christina and to Sheila, is that this is about the larger process of figuring out how and when and for what we are communicating with the community, how we're engaging with the community, and specifically in terms of, I mean, both more broadly, but also in terms of the strategic plan elements that we have coming up. So I wondered, Christina, if you could actually share with the rest of the board, before Sheila talks to us about communication, which is, I think, one of the things going on here, what what was the activity that the Community Engagement Committee was hoping to?
Well, there were a couple things. I mean, I should have mentioned this prior. One of the things that happened was we did put a survey out at town meeting. So there's been some information gathered at the town meeting related to the similar survey that everyone else had already gotten. We just wanted to try one more time to get as many people in the community, but we didn't have the greatest response from, no, but in general, I think not so many. But with that said, I mean, the tabletop activity has been talked about over the last few months by a variety of people as a way to engage the public prior to our scheduled board meetings, since it would be an opportune time for the public to be here anyway. And so we would use that venue, if you will, to come up with topics to talk and engage the community about.
Good question.
Yes.
How are you going to get them here?
Good question, George. Hot topics, I think. And then this document that you all were sent is something that Sue put together based upon the fact that we've been talking about trying to get this process off the ground and using the Community Engagement Committee to help facilitate the process on behalf of the board. Does that make sense? I know with that said, we probably as a group could decide to do a tabletop on April 8th. But, yeah.
George had a question, and then I wanted to turn to Sheila. Go ahead.
So is this, the various levels, is this a progression?
So that's
So-
my document.
Okay.
So I think the thing she held up that she was speaking to is something different.
Oh.
So, the.
Which one you're looking at, the
That I'll
communication
talk about
plan?
in just a sec.
So that's
Yeah.
all Sheila there, yeah.
Did everyone get this?
From
It's
Sue.
From
From
Sue.
Sue.
Would it be possible to make copies of this? Sorry.
Did you get a copy?
No, I didn't get that.
So I can speak about this while we're waiting for copies. This, to me, is just a helpful frame, I think, for us going forward to think about communication, levels of communication just in general, and kind of going back to the strategic planning committee a little bit too. There was a lot of conversation about strategies like the tabletop being a mechanism by which we engage with the community about the work that we have to do. Figuring out where we're going to go to find nearly $2 million out of our budget is going to be a tall order that's going to require all kinds of levels of communication. So just to walk through this just a little bit, level one communication is the kind of communication where we just put out information. Schools do this all the time when we send out newsletters and so on and so forth. emails, anything. So when we're communicating about the work of the board, that would be communication that we might just send out for information. Level 2 communication is when we're soliciting information from the public. So the survey that the Community Engagement Committee did, or the work that we did earlier this fall, where we're asking people for input on a particular idea. Level 3 would be us responding to that input in some way, so there's a little bit of back and forth. So we saw that recently with the schedule change with the frequently asked questions. So we gathered questions that the public had, and then we put back out frequently asked questions to help continue informing folks about it. When we get up to level 4, that's engagement. So that's when there's discussion and dialogue and back and forth just between us, as whether that's the board, the administration, whomever, with the public, but public is talking to each other about those ideas as well. So that's that level of engagement. Whereas
Thanks, Jane.
level 5 communication is something where we're partnering for a specific purpose. So that could be a task force or some sort of special project that we might do. So in our communications planning at the administrative team, we're using this frame to help identify the level of engagement or communication that we're looking for. So this comes back, I think, to this idea of is community engagement a thing in it of itself, or is it a tool by which we do our work? And I don't think there's a right answer to that question. It's just something we keep circling back around. So I think that the tabletops as a structure, as a system, as something we can develop and rely upon, could be a really helpful tool going forward to get through some of these really hard things that we have to talk about. So I propose this be, just a way that we can talk about communication going forward, and then maybe a frame for us to think about these tabletops as a great level 4 or level 3. It's sort of like between a 3 and a 4 about some of these hot topics, because we could queue up some really important information that we share out, but then there's that opportunity for dialogue. So I think we could practice that with something sooner rather than later, and then develop it as something folks know will
Happen every month or whenever,
and then
yeah.
we can progressively engage in more, meatier topics too, as time goes on. And to go back, this fall, when we met the 2 times this fall, we were talking about really meaty topics, and they were, level 3, level 4 types, really open-ended. What do you think? What should we do? They're the same questions that have been going out through surveys and so on and so forth. So, I just thought I would add that.
Yeah.
So you indicated that you didn't get a very good response from the surveys, and you did the surveys,
At town meeting, just recently.
okay.
Yeah.
So was it that there weren't many people at town meeting, or did the people that were there just not respond?
I handed 80-plus paper surveys out. I stood by the door going into the, to the gym, and I only got 6 back.
6. So people don't care.
I don't know if it was because I didn't have enough pencils.
I-
I don't know. I mean, I could, if I stood there and said, and a lot of people said, oh, no, I don't want one of those. And so I couldn't force myself upon them, but.
You gave them the opportunity.
Right.
It was presented to them.
Correct.
And if they didn't bother to take it and turn it back in, and if they didn't have a pencil, they could have taken it home and mailed it to somebody. Could have gone to the district office.
Well, one of them showed up at the town clerk's office on March, the time when we voted. So
Okay,
they handed
well-
it to me when I came in.
So,
I think the point, George, is we're trying to exhaust many different avenues to ask people questions. And that was just one more way where we could reach out and say, here you go, we want to hear from you.
I mean, it's a captive audience.
Yeah,
and
because they
a
were all in
fair
one
amount of
room,
people
but,
there.
you know, we did get awesome attendance at the 2 fall events. We've gotten survey responses online through Front Porch Forum.
Mhm.
You know, it's just compiling all of it now and looking at it. That's one of the next steps to, you know, just feedback that we will have moving forward to start talking about the big decisions we have to make.
I think one of the things we just need to be really clear about is that, you know, when it comes, you know, the community engaging with us, we're all us, right? Whether it's the administration, the schools, or you as a board. And yet there is a distinction between how and who needs to be, you know, leading this engagement when it comes to thinking about programs and teaching and learning. And, you know, I think what I'm trying to say is that, you know, there'll be so much that needs to be discussed in relation to the important decisions that lie ahead. And while I can see the point that you're making about the response to the survey, those questions might not have felt particularly relevant to folks, but I think at the point we're talking about trying to find $2 million in the budget, they may have a stronger opinion. So whether, and it's not one kind of engagement, one and done, that we will have to do about that. We're gonna have to really do level 1 communication, level 2 communication, to really help people understand the situation we're in as a community and move forward. So this is just one thing we might do, and we'll need to do lots of other things too.
I understand what you're saying, but we just had a vote on a large increase in taxes that barely passed. And there isn't a person in this room, outside of our gentlemen friends from the TV, that is not part of what we're doing here. And that means that there is absolutely no one from the public that has got enough involvement in this process to come in and sit down and talk about it or listen to it. I think that you're creating a very, very uphill battle in trying to imagine that you're going to engage those people in this decision. It's something that we've got to decide on. Now, it's great if they want to be engaged, but I don't think that we should waste a tremendous amount of resources, given that we're getting a very, very minimal response from people with what we've tried. And you've had meetings, you've run surveys. This wasn't the first survey you ran, you've run some before. I think that we need to really look at this as a problem that we have to solve. Now, if someone makes an additional contribution, that's great. We certainly aren't going to lock them out. But at the same time, we have to look at this as this is the road that we're traveling on, and we've got to make these hard decisions.
I personally don't disagree, but I also think that as you do that work and come up with ideas or things that have merit, you're going to want to push those out for feedback or for the purposes of just communicating clearly where you're at, so that when it comes to a vote, people know what to expect. Otherwise, I think we'll get really mixed results because people won't have enough information, and they'll base their vote only on their emotional response to what they're presented with, rather than information. And you know, that I think it's going to be such a difficult path ahead that I think we just have to keep the community informed. I don't necessarily think everybody wants to participate in every level of decision-making, but I think we have to work quickly, and we need to create feedback loops so people know what's happening.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that last year, one of the surveys that we did put out was, what is your preferred method of communication? And we did get over 200 responses to that survey, and over 100 people said, actually, surveys was their preferred. That was by far and above the largest.
That's funny.
So maybe it was just, and a lot of people responded online, so maybe, and we did maybe a better job really pushing it out on the Front Porch Forum, putting it into in the newsletters, on the websites, et cetera. But other things that really ticked pretty high there were things like open houses and newsletters and things of that nature. So I think what they really wanted to say is, we're not a one-size-fits-all. We talk about personalized learning. Well, it's personalized feedback, and they have a lot of different ways that they want to give their feedback and want to give their input, so.
Can I just ask a question? Was this survey just in Ferrisburg?
No.
No,
It was not at Virginia, because I did not get one.
It was at the town meeting
Oh,
night,
yeah,
and then
it was
it
outside.
was at the polling place for a very short time until it
Okay.
was pulled, because legally, we could not have them in polling places.
Okay, because I
Yep.
did not get one.
Yeah.
No,
And
it-
Rose,
I
this,
wouldn't say a lot of
this
Joan
survey,
pulled it.
I believe,
Because
went
there's a
out to all
complaint.
the staff prior,
Oh, I
way
probably
back
already
when.
filled it out.
You might
But
have,
I was
yeah.
just thinking of other people, like my husband didn't say he got a survey or
Yeah.
anything,
No,
so.
there was a complaint at the polling.
Statute on that, that's another.
Yeah, it,
But I'm just curious, you're talking about something that I was, wait a minute, I voted, I know that.
Yeah.
no, it got yanked early in the morning, and I got an
Okay.
email from
So
Joan
I had
saying,
to
can't do
work,
it.
so I had to get up to work.
And there were 8 or 9 responses from Panton, I know that, I saw the responses, so.
You can't have information about a candidate for whom you might be voting on that day, but all topics are allowed as of, I think it was 2008 that they changed.
I think
that.
it just changed, though, the
Yeah.
Senator Doyle's thing that was going on and on. You can't do that anymore because I think
Oh,
last
okay.
year, it got pulled down saying, we don't want somebody, each community shouldn't have to decide, well, is this information, is this not, is this, so it's a blanket rule, there are no types of surveys. You can stand outside and hand them out, they can't be inside.
Not in the polling place, sorry to interrupt.
No, no.
Oh, me
George?
too.
No, that was the problem, is we thought the same thing, and
Yeah.
I know that Lori Childers also handed out the survey in Addison.
Yeah.
So it was offered to all the people who showed up there.
As long as you were there before 10 o'clock.
Well, and in Waltham.
well, what to meeting, that town meeting night
Yeah,
was,
did
Yeah, this is town meeting
I think
night,
John was there.
We,
the night before.
Ben
the vote.
Huston handed them out in Waltham, and then I said, and they'll be here tomorrow when you come to vote, but apparently they were gone by the time we went to vote. So I mean, so I think one of the challenges is that, and I really, I think this is a really helpful set of piece, kind of framing, because when we talk about engagement, I feel like when the board talks about interacting with the community, we tend to use one word, engagement, to talk about 5 or 6 different processes. And, so there are 5 different words here. There's communication, there's listening, there's consulting, there's engaging, there's partnering, all of which are different processes. And I think one of the things that Sheila was pointing to is that there are at different stages of this strategic planning and budgeting process, we need to use different tools for what we're trying to get at. We're still pretty early in figuring out, we know there's a problem, but how to solve that problem, I think, or move towards resolutions that are palatable to the community at large is something that I think we're not anywhere near.
But the problem is that the problem is about 10% of the budget. And as something that large, we can't just dither. We have to form a plan and move forward and refine that plan as we move. Now, if we're able to get input, that's great, but we need to be prepared to move forward even if we don't.
I mean, I think the goal is to make the commitment to get the input, right, as a board.
You can't make people talk to you if they don't want to.
But I think everybody's right. And I think, I guess I would just add, this is your meeting and I'm talking too much, but that wasn't what I was going to add. But I think that you have to provide some really concrete facts about the situation in order to get quality feedback from the community. Because if you just say, what do you think we should do? They're going to propose things that either aren't possible or aren't legal. And I'm not saying that to be funny, but, you know, even in the dialogue that we did last fall, there were people that, you know, there were a few suggestions that just, they wouldn't be possible. For example, eliminate special ed as a means to save money. Well, that's illegal. We can't do that. So, you know, sometimes you have to provide more structure to have a conversation, to have that engagement actually produce something that's actionable for us, you know? So I think that we have to think about making decisions really, you know, in short order, right? You gotta kind of step up the pace so that you can continue to queue up this in terms of like scenarios for the public and options for the public. 'Cause it can't just be pie in the sky that I think that we're all just, what do you think we should do? Because we don't have a lot of time for that kind of process.
I mean, we've kind of asked those questions too, like we started here and now we have to like, start to whittle it down.
Right, so I
and-
think people can give really good feedback and really will give really good feedback if given choices and options that they understand and can, you know, kind of put a price tag to really. You know, option one, this is what it would mean for you, this is what it would mean, you know, in terms of cost, in terms of education, and so on and so forth. So figure out what those benefits are and present it in that way, so.
George?
So, I mean, I was just doing some math here on the budget, and it looks like special ed's about 9.5 million of the total budget, and I'm wondering, can we even, I mean, how much of that can we even touch legally? It's about 43%.
All depends on the needs of the students in that given year.
What's that?
Our budget's around 4.5.
4.5? How did I get 9.5 then, totaling up?
Still, it's
Bunch of lines here.
22%. It is a
I mean, it's a-
substantial part of the budget.
It's a tricky, you know, it's a
You gotta
tricky
realize,
conversation.
you gotta realize that Kara has taken a knife to that budget in the last 2-3 years. She has really trimmed that.
We are reimbursed at 56 point whatever percent and change from the state for that. So your real special ed budget's about 2.4 that you pay from local funds.
Right, you get revenue back based on your.
I'm seeing there's another line here, 1,200 special ed, which is 3.6 million? In addition to the 4.5 or 4.6050 special ed? That's where I'm getting that 9.
1,200 is in the 05.
That's within the 050.
That's within it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Are you looking at the current year, or are you looking at the future budget?
revised budget.
Bill, while we're waiting on this, Bill,
I'll
did
be
you have
super
a-
quick, because I know public comment is over, and thank you, Tom, for a few seconds. I think even if you do everything perfect in the communication area, that you can still lose the narrative, and when you lose the narrative, it's totally illogical. Parents are gonna decide, community members are gonna decide, you did an awful job communicating it, you were withholding information, there are conspiracy theories that might get batted around. And if that happens, now you're playing this huge game of catch-up, and I think that you saw some of that recently, where you're spending a ton of time now trying to fix a narrative that you lost control over, and that's distracting you from moving forward. And when we move forward with some of the major changes that are gonna happen in the next year, I just think you can't lose that narrative. And George is right, people aren't showing up, but if you say we're gonna close the school, but that's one of the options we have to consider, they're gonna show up for that. And I think, so just really quickly, I think Sheila's idea of having a scaled response is important, but acknowledge that in some cases you might think it's a 2, and some people in the community might think it's a 5 that requires a lot of engagement. You might think we're just pushing out a decision we made, and they might be thinking, no, we wanna help you make that decision. And there are lots of different channels that you can use, short of just coming in here and, you know, and asking people to show up and give comments. This isn't really a good place to give comments. Even now, I'm kind of breaking the rules. So I'll be quiet and thank you for the few seconds.
Well, and to both yours and George's point, we do need to keep engaged. We do need to make sure people are saying, but, and there has to be a clear delineation of we've provided information here, and we've had open houses here, and we've done this and this and this. So when we get to the 11th hour and suddenly say, okay, here's the decision, and then the floodgates open and people say, hey, we never knew anything and we don't like any of that, and say, you did. We begged you to come and talk to us. We begged you to help us. And we're done. We can't do anything else. We are at the end of this game now. And that's it. And you can be mad at us and you can vote it down, but don't say you didn't have a chance. We just have to make sure that they know that they had a chance, and there's no way to bury your head saying, well, I had no idea.
I think that has to be our goal. We can't let that happen, and I'm just.
It's human nature. A
That's
lot
like
of people are gonna
that
do that
commitment
anyways.
piece.
We read our front porch forums, and there are people out there who, at the end, suddenly come up with crazy statements that, hey, where did this come from, and why didn't you talk to us months in advance when there was a request to talk to us months in advance?
Elizabeth, did you?
So, sorry about that. When I look at the 050, so the 050 total special education, that's a grand total of all of special education. There's different pieces of special education, so the 1,200 you're talking about is the direct service part, direct service to students part, but there's other support services like the psychological services and all that that you see underneath that, that add up. So that 3.6 million is inside of the 4.5 million total, yeah.
So, this was a discussion,
Back to tabletop?
and no, I actually, I think we should, table the tabletop. But, one thing that I wanna note, we do need, so I would ask everybody on the board to review this, to look at this. We do need to review our vision statement by policy. And so one of the thoughts was that we would ask for feedback from the community who showed up to a tabletop activity. What do you think about the vision statement? Is this something that is reflective of what you want? The other thing that Sue and Sheila had kind of worked through was a set of to try to get a set of priorities, and that's from people, and that's what this other side of the page is about. So I think that look at this, review it. We'll come back to this. Obviously, this is a conversation that has to keep happening. I don't think we can make any decisions about anything right now. I think it's hard. We don't have a full community engagement committee.
And it is just a discussion.
Well, it could be, yeah. And I mean, this could really be a board activity if we wanted to choose to do it at the April 8th thing. But yeah, I don't think it was intended the community engagement committee would necessarily run the tabletop. It would be whoever shows up kind of thing, but certainly the committee could run it too, which is, and I think that's something else to think about in terms of the board and, you know, how does the community engagement committee fit into the communication plan? Like, how do you want to use that committee to do X, Y, you know?
Right.
What do you want to use the committee for? This would be important to talk about at some point too.
Did you want to say?
Actually literally scratching.
That's how I think most of the time. No. So with that, before George Gardner gets mad at me, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? Thanks, everybody.